Welcome, everyone. My name is Dan Piedra, Assistant Director in Continuing Education here at McMaster. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone and to facilitate our meeting today. As you know, this event used to be held face-to-face at one Jackson Square, where we used to meet in person. And then a couple of years ago, we moved it to a virtual event. So this year we thought we would continue that. Before we get started, I just want to draw your attention to our land acknowledgement that McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and then Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We also take this time to acknowledge that many people in the world are caught in situations of war and political strife at this time. May the leaders of these regions find resolution that will yield peace for all who live there. Our agenda for today includes a couple of short presentations and a keynote presentation. So once I'm finished with the introduction here and everything, I'm going to flip the mic, I guess, or the screen over to Danielle, one of our members of our design team, our educational development team. And she's going to present on the role of web content and course developers, as well as an instructional designer in terms of how it relates to instructors. Once her presentation is finished, then we'll flip it over to another member of the educational development team, Anastasia, who's going to take us through a short presentation on generative AI for teaching and learning, the risks, rewards, and future considerations. And then at the conclusion of her presentation, we'll flip it over to Ben Taylor, who's going to present today on writing with generative AI enhancement or replacement. So as you can see, there's a fair amount of sort of technology-driven topics in our agenda today, which is probably a reflection of what's happening in our world and in the real world. So as is usually the case, whatever happens in the real world ends up filtering its way into education. So we will do our best to stay on top of these things and to make you aware of certain situations. And I'll hand it over to Danielle, who's going to come on, share her screen, and take you through her presentation.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, good evening, everyone. Like Dan said, my name is Danielle. I'm meant to be joined tonight by my colleague Lavinia, who many of you know is our web content and course developer. We serve together on the educational development team here at MCE. Unfortunately, Lavinia is feeling quite poorly right now, so she's going to be unable to join us tonight. She sends her regrets. As some of you might know, though, I was previously in the WCCD position, so I feel confident that I'll be able to speak about the importance of this role, especially as it relates to instructors, just not as well as Lavinia could have, obviously. So the presentation tonight, as our title suggests, will focus on who the development team is and what we do here at MCE. So over the next few slides, I'm going to provide just a very high-level overview of how development works and what our team does. Some of you might actually be familiar with our processes if you've worked with us in the capacity as SMEs before. So our team is overseen by Dan. There are 5 instructional designers, one of whom is in a lead position, and then 1 web content and course developer, WCCD, who is, of course, Lavinia. So what exactly is it that the instructional designers do? Well, we build the courses that you ultimately come in and teach. So as the slide here says, we take the content that the SME's knowledge and expertise creates, and we turn that into the final product, which is our courses in one format or another. And you can see here we do the online asynchronous, virtual, micro-credentials. We're also involved in course revisions, textbook updates, new program structures. So there's a lot that our instructional design team and our instructional designers are involved with. So typically we'll work one-on-one with SMEs in a very iterative process where we focus on curating content and contextualizing it in a meaningful way for students. Some of you who have been with us for a longer period of time have probably seen our older courses, which are in a different format than our newly developed materials. So our new stuff has taken a more standardized approach. Everything has a very standardized and templated sort of look and feel. We go with a very clean and simple design. This is to ensure ease of navigation for students, but also whether a student is taking a course in accounting or decides to take something in project management or human resources management, or they're taking one of our mindfulness courses, all of the courses will have that same look and feel and be easy for them to navigate. So consistency there is key. So this is a bit of an overview of what our development process looks like in terms of timeline. So as the note here suggests, the number of months will vary depending on the length of the course. 10 months is typical, though, for our standard courses. We start off with that onboarding process where we bring in the SME and we'll have a kickoff meeting. And then we move into the designing and planning. So the most important piece here is that we will build out a course plan. So this is the blueprint or the roadmap of what the whole course will look like. And most importantly, this dictates and ensures that all of the learning outcomes for the course are met. So we'll have course learning outcomes that feed, or program learning outcomes rather, that feed into course learning outcomes that then feed into the more granular module learning outcomes that we need to ensure that students are meeting by the end of taking a particular course. The instructional designers will work on multiple projects simultaneously with overlap. So if there's 3 terms throughout the year, we're working on multiple projects per term, but typically we're working on, 2, sometimes even 3 terms at a time. So as you can imagine, it's a bit of a time-consuming process, and it takes a lot of dedication from our SMEs. So we're always very grateful to have such high-quality SMEs here. Our design process is very intentional and makes use of well thought out and created templates, which we'll take a look at in this next slide here. So if you take a look at the image on the left, that is the template that we use in Word document format when we're creating a module. And so a module is where we break down a topic, typically for a week. If we're looking in terms of how a schedule for a course would be broken down, it's typically a ratio of 1 module per week, although that can vary from time to time. Then the image on the right is the finalized version of that integrated into the LMS. So anyone who's worked as a SME has definitely seen both sides of that. And for all of our instructors, you've certainly seen what that finalized copy within the LMS looks like. So essentially what we do is we create everything in the templates, whether it's the module, assignments, quizzes, discussions, and then it's pretty much a carbon copy into the LMS. This standardized design that we use, number one, as I've mentioned, will ensure that regardless of the program that a student is taking a course in, they'll have a very similar look and feel and be able to easily navigate. But it also means that if we have a SME who's working on multiple projects or an instructor who's teaching multiple courses, even though the content's going to be different, the overall look will be the same. Another big reason why we use these templates is to ensure accessibility for our students. So our templates are designed with accessibility in mind. So when you see at the top over here, so right at the top over here, are you able to see that? There we go. So where we have the title here, that it's the module, and then it's related back over here. When we see that in the document format, it is, sorry, let me turn this back off. When we see that in the document format, that comes up as a heading 1. So it tells students that that is the main heading. And then as we go throughout, the headings will change. So there'll be a heading 2. If something is nested within there, we'll have a heading 3. So this is particularly important if we have students using assistive technology like a screen reader, because the screen reader will tell the student what section the information belongs to if they can't visually see that cue of the different size or the different style of font. So all of this is created within the Word document, but then the HTML code within Avenue to Learn is also already formatted to ensure that it'll stay accessible as well. This is just one element of accessibility, but just a little snapshot of how it's built into our design process. So switching gears now, the larger focus of our presentation today is meant to be on that WCCD role, which, as we know, provides support for our team, the instructional designers, the development team overall, our SMEs, our staff, and of course, our instructors. So Lavinia provides support through LMS integration, quality assurance testing, training and support, tracking sheets and course revisions, and also creating a lot of resources and training materials. So looking at the integration of content into the LMS, Lavinia really focuses on those more complex Avenue functionalities, especially when it has to do with components of the HTML code. If we're using a third party, for example, she can assist with that integration. And then she's also revising and maintaining courses to ensure that the offerings stay current. And that's done through our tracking sheet process, which we'll touch on in the next slide. Quality assurance testing is also a really important part of the WCCD role. So when an instructional designer finishes a course and it's integrated in Avenue to Learn, Lavinia, as our WCCD, will then go in and check everything in the course. She'll check all the links to make sure they're working. She'll ensure everything is accessible. She'll make sure that all of the functions and features, that everything is set up properly so the course runs smoothly. Any issues that she finds, she makes sure get corrected. That way, students don't encounter these issues when the course runs live within the term. Looking at our next point here about the instructor and staff support and training, Lavinia provides a lot of support in technical aspects for a variety of tools and platforms. One of those chiefly being Avenue to Learn, Zoom as well. She also will run workshops and training on these, which then relates to our last point on this slide, where Lavinia is creating and maintaining a variety of resources on different digital learning tools within the LMS that will support course development, learning, and assessment. So as you can see, there's a lot that goes into the WCCD position. So a big component of the role as well is course maintenance. And so that's chiefly done through 3 approaches. One of which is our standard tracking sheets. So if you've been teaching with us for a while, you're likely familiar with these. This is a template in Word document format that you'll fill out to track any changes that need to be made within a course. Now, these are typically going to be smaller changes, like a broken link that needs to be changed, or if terminology has changed and a word needs to be different within the content or a quiz or something like that. You'll mark it down in the tracking sheet, submit it to the program manager, and once they approve it, that will get sent off to Lavinia so the changes can be captured in the master. Now, these changes won't include anything that's personal to the instructor. So if you're adding supplementary resources that you want to share with your students, announcements, video notes, things of that nature, those are all considered instructor personalization, and those reside solely within the term shell. The master shell is meant to be the sort of clean, perfect version of the course that does not have one instructor's sort of imprint on it. Secondly, here we have the textbook updates tracking sheet. Very similar to the first, pretty similar template as well, but we specifically use this for courses that use textbooks and when the edition changes. So a SME will be contracted, they'll fill out this tracking sheet, and then Lavinia would go in and she would make the updates in the module pages to the chapter and page number references or whatever it is that's needed to change because of that textbook. Finally, we have small course revisions. So these will be for small bits of outdated content where perhaps a new resource is required, or if a small tweak or wordsmithing is needed within an evaluation. These revisions, though, it's important to note, are not for any major changes to a course. So we wouldn't be changing the structure of the course, the timeline, the evaluation structure, things like that. Those would all be considered major, and they would need to be scheduled with an ID to be completed. So continuing on with the tracking sheets, many of you would have seen our template. So this is what the front end of the template looks like. It provides examples of how to fill it out. And then this is a completed sample of what a tracking sheet will look like. So you can see here that there's quite a bit of information that's been added, where we have the date, we have a lot of specifics leading us to the location of the change in Avenue. That way it's easy for Lavinia to determine exactly where the change needs to be made. Then we also have what is currently showing and what it needs to be changed to, as well as some reference notes. And this would have been sent to the program manager by the instructor. Once the program manager approves it, they then send it to Lavinia, and she will make those changes within the master shell. So as a final point on the role of the WCCD, we've mentioned that Lavinia's role is probably best known for offering support to instructors as well as some support to students. So many of you will be familiar with our instructor guides. These have taken on many different forms over the years, but presently reside within an ebook. These are continually being updated, which is a pretty big job. So Brightspace, which is the parent company of Avenue to Learn, when they change, how a tool or the functionality of something works within the LMS, we need to respond by keeping our materials up to date so that they're actually helpful to our instructors and to our students. These are available within every term shell. So every time you teach, you'll have a link to this, but I can throw the link in the chat after the presentation in case you want to browse through or bookmark it. But when you go to the landing page, this is what you'll see. So it's Avenue to Learn and MCE Instructor's Guide, and then you'll click on this here where it says Read Book. And then this is what the next page will look like. So you see that there is a big content section here. It's all broken down into various different types of resources. And then it's also broken down sort of by timeline. So it's the before, during, and after the course. So you have a sense of what resources you need at different times within the course. And so finally, as I end off here, a bit of exciting news is that we're going to have a new support process launching. So a Jira ticketing system is going to replace the current support email. So that's that CCE course dev that we use. I will preface this by saying the information on the slide is really all we have right now. More information will be forthcoming. But the Jira ticketing system has been in the works for many, many years now. And we're finally getting ready to launch it. So this will allow us to centralize support requests. Right now, support requests will come into Lavinia from all different sources and to all different emails. She'll get stuff to her personal email, to the course dev email. Sometimes she gets added into a different Jira ticket. So things are sort of all over the place. Primarily, though, this is going to help keep track of requests, and then it'll also allow us to extract data and run statistics on the volume and types of requests and just organize things a lot better, ultimately helping Lavinia and the rest of the team to better support instructors and staff. So the form that I'm about to show you is actually live already, so you can start using it now. And then we'll have a sort of slow transition process, but then the email account will be retired in spring of 2025, and everything will start running through the Jira ticketing system. And as that final note there mentions, instructions will be sent out, instructions and reminders will be sent out in the instructor newsletter in the new year. So no need to worry, lots of information will be sent over so we can ensure a smooth transition. I'm just going to pop out of the slideshow here so I can show you what the new ticketing system will look like. So is everyone still able to see my screen? Okay, I see some nods. So you can see through the sidebar over here that this link will already be preset to the WCCD support. It's broken down into support for program managers, instructors, and MCE staff, and then further broken down by tracking sheets, Avenue support, and Zoom support. So when you click on one of these, the form will pop up. And then rather than sending an email format, you'll just populate the various fields within the form. You'll describe the issue that you're having, the issue that you need resolved. And then there is also room for attachments here. So if you need to share a screenshot or something like that, there's a space to do that within there also. You're welcome to start using it. And then as we transition into the spring 2025 term, this will be the new system that everyone is using. That is it from me. I think I've taken up enough of everybody's time now. I'll flip it back over to Dan.
Okay, thank you. No, that was excellent. Lots of good information there.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Anastasia, and I'm an instructional designer for educational development team. And my presentation is going to focus on the risk, rewards, and future considerations of using generative AI for teaching and learning. Let's start with the definition of generative AI first. According to IBM, generative AI refers to deep learning models that can create complex original content, such as long-form text, high-quality images, realistic video or audio, and more in response to a user's prompt or request. All AI models are usually also called black boxes. Why do they call like this? Because their internal decision-making processes are not transparent. As you all know, most of the AI models are commercial ones. That's why they do keep their secrets inside and not share with the audience. So we don't really know how they train their models, where the training content come from. Also, these models are quite complex to understand, and even developers of them don't really know how do they work 100%, how do they analyze information, how do they reply to the prompts. And finally, they're too big to analyze because they were trained on billions of pages of texts. That's why it's nearly impossible to analyze them. Next slide, please. This creates risks, and one of the risks includes biases. The first bias is related to Western views, because all models were trained based on English language texts. That's why their multilingual capability is quite misleading. And while the most can output answers in various languages, they lack understanding of other cultures and values. And whatever they know about different cultures is mostly learned from English sources. Another limitation here is that AI models tend to reinforce gender, race, and user biases. The latest UNESCO research found that, for example, female names were mainly linked with the words like home, family, children, mother, while male names were strongly associated with words related to business, such as executive, salary, and career. Similarly, Zulu men were more likely to be given occupations such as security guards or gardeners, while British men were given occupations ranging from doctors to bankers and teachers. Also, the model's dialogue nature can reinforce users' biases over the course of interaction. For example, the model may agree with the user's strong opinion on a political issue, reinforcing their belief, which may not be exactly true in reality. And finally, the online texts used to train AI language models can include racist, sexist, ageist, and other form of adverse content. As a result, AI models can generate toxic outputs. And there is also the danger of intentionally using AI to create such content, even though all AI companies try to block prompts that use adverse content. There is no 1% guarantee that when using ChatGPT, we don't face these things. Next slide, please. Here comes another risk, which is called hallucinations. Generative tools create content based on probabilistic models, generating responses to prompts without actual knowledge. As a result, the information produced by these tools may include factual errors and made-up citations because they just cannot fact-check things. And this phenomenon is called hallucination, which highlights the need to fact-check all responses from generative AI tools. Another issue here is that the language used by these tools is very convincing. Even if the model gives the wrong answer, it speaks with confidence, so making us believe that it's correct one, which makes hallucinations even worse. The next slide, please. And the final risk here relates to accountability. Generative AI tools use diverse data sets to learn and generate outputs, and often incorporate publicly shared content, such as personal blogs and content created by artists or writers without explicit consent, which creates many copyright issues. Another issue relates to academic dishonesty. It raises a lot of concerns. However, one of the study conducted at Stanford University did find that AI is not increasing the frequency of cheating. For years long before generative AI, some 60 to 70% of students reported engaging in at least one cheating behavior. So the one who wants to cheat will find the way how to cheat. And the reasons why students cheat, there are many reasons why do students cheat. They may have trouble learning, or they are exhausted, or there are maybe too many written assignments. For example, in my practice, I did take a course where I contributed over 38,000 of words just for discussion assignment on top of other, and it's just for one course. So if students take 2 or 3 courses like that, it's really hard to catch up. So it's not about the tools that we have, it's about different reasons, as I mentioned, and it's even the reason is our teaching practices as well. And final risk here is that companies can use the data we input into the tool to train their models. That's why we shouldn't be sharing any personal information with the tool, even though some companies, most of the companies now offer an option to turn off data collection. We still don't know how this information is going to be used and if it's going to really work well. For example, if you use ChatGPT and different versions of ChatGPT, free or paid, you need to ensure that you turn off the data collection in both ones, even they work in the same window, but they operate in a different system, as I could say. Turning off one version doesn't mean that you turn off the second one. So sometimes it's not really clear how to do that. Next slide, please. Of course, there are some rewards of using these tools, and let's review a few ones for students. AI can support them, providing assistance for distance learning programs or international students in different time zones, and those who prefer self-paced learning. By answering their inquiries 24/7. For example, York University created their own AI tool called CREA, which is embedded into their LMS, into each course, and students can ask questions about the course, about content of the course, evaluations, or anything that's in mind. And within seconds, tool brings up all the answers students need. So instructors don't have to spend time answering all of these questions. Now tools can do that. Another reward is that tools can provide personalized feedback and explanation for students, retrieving their knowledge gaps. For example, if you've ever used Duolingo app to learn some languages, the app is working on this principle. It finds out the gaps in your knowledge and then gives you more and more activities to practice this skill. So you could fill this gap. And finally, AI tools can stimulate conversation or provide language correction if you teach languages. One of these examples would be Google tool to practice job interviews. The tool asks you job interview questions, then you record your answer, and then the tool provides you feedback how you did on the interview. Next slide, please. And of course, there are some rewards for educators. As I mentioned, tools now can assist by providing quick references, answers to the questions, and guidance in a few seconds. So instructors could spend more time actually giving feedback to students, or providing in-depth analysis of their work. Also, AI tools can assist by creating course outlines, quizzes, rubrics, and slides, which is very helpful, especially for instructors who has never taught before. It could be a very good starting point for them to start developing their courses. And of course, incorporating AI tools can introduce innovative and interactive learning experiences for students, like role-playing activities. The one that I mentioned, Google job interview. I'm sure there are many other tools like that instructors could use for students to role-play some scenarios. Next slide, please. And if you conduct research, there are some tools that can assist with literature reviews, analyzing data, and forming hypotheses. It can help researchers review large amounts of information, summarize findings, and propose potential research directions. But again, please remember that you need to double check and triple check all the facts, because all these models can hallucinate. Next slide, please. So, what are the future considerations for us? Since it's a still brand new tool, we need to build a holistic understanding of how to use it by connecting it to its roots in various interdisciplinary subjects. Because up until now, we don't really know what particular subjects benefit more from using AI. Do we need to use AI in every single subject we teach? For example, math is not really doing well. And maybe we could find out some other subjects. Next one is that we need to learn how ethically retrieve and create credible content, organize new information, and connect it to existing knowledge. Of course, we need to rethink our assessment practices and offer assessment that aim to understand students' processes when given tasks, rather than outcome or product of learning activities. So learning is a journey. It's not a final destination now. And of course, assessment should focus on the knowledge of the subject matter and AI literacy. Next slide, please. And finally, the last 2 points are quite big, because we need a system-wide vision and strategic priorities based on in-depth understanding of students' learning and how AI impacts their learning, rather than just trends and market demands. And academic integrity policy should be designed or redesigned. I know some departments give instructors flexibility in terms of how to frame their policy in their outlines. It could create some issues for students, because every instructor could understand academic integrity with AI from different perspectives. And every time students take a course, and every time if this understanding is different from the previous one, it's kind of challenging for them to align what they do and really understand what AI is. Then I would like to share my screen now because I would like to share a couple of tools with you. We don't really have much time, but at the end of the presentation, I'm gonna share all the links with you. And if you are interested, you can I was trying to open it up. If you are interested, you can learn about these tools more. Please let me know if you can see my screen, hopefully.
We're just seeing the, oh yeah, okay, right.
Okay,
We're seeing the PowerPoint slide with the names on them.
thank you. Awesome. So the first two tools were developed by Canadian company Contact North, and they're quite safe to use, I would say, if I can say that, because they don't use content to train their models. So the first one is for students. Let's say if students can choose what they want to do, if they want to check their knowledge and skills on specific topic, or they want to grow knowledge and skills on specific topic. Let's say they want to check their knowledge, then they could either type the topic they want to check, or they could also upload documents, and tool will create questions for them. They could also choose the level from elementary to professional, hit start, and then AI starts asking questions and then providing feedback. The next tool is for teachers. It can help create multiple choice questions or essay questions with scoring rubric, syllabus, teaching notes, and slides in seconds. Let's say you have a course about learning culture. You want to create description of the course. You put number of words, a length of the session. Let's say we want to have 10, language, hit generate. And in a few seconds, it does create description of the course. Then we can create learning outcomes. Let's say we want 5. Same way, it creates outline. We want in each module, we want to have 4 subtopics. It does create subtopics.
Anastasia, I can't see the tool. Like,
Yeah, you're showing it because all we're seeing is the PowerPoint slide that has them listed.
Sorry.
Could you maybe reshare your screen again with the tool? If you're showing the tool, then we could see it.
Yeah, I'm always done. Why didn't you tell me?
There you go.
Yes, now I
we can
see
see
it.
it. Yeah.
This one is for students. Sorry, no, it's too close. As I mentioned, you could choose either a specific topic or use your own content. I just put human rights. You choose the level, and tool starts asking students questions so they could practice and providing feedback. For instructors, they could create multiple choice questions based on their content, essay questions with scoring rubric, syllabus, teaching notes, slides. I did show example with syllabus. Let's say we need course on learning culture. We put number of words we want, number of weeks, language, and in a few seconds, it does generate course description. Then we want 5 outcomes, or how many. It does create outcomes. Then we think about how many topics we want each week or each module, let's say 4. And it does create a short outline. It even can create notes. It's gonna take a few seconds, and at the end it can even create slides, but we are not gonna try this out. You can check it yourself. Same with essay question. If you have specific topic, or you could upload your file, number of questions, level. You press hit. And if you want rubric, you can generate that for each question as well. So from excellent to inadequate, sometimes it's quite hard to create all of these rubrics. And finally, the final two tools. I'm not gonna talk about OpenRead because it's not a free tool, but it's a very good one if you do research. And Notebook LM was created by Google. It's free for now. What it does, it helps researchers to summarize articles and do so many other things. For example, I uploaded my personal article to the tool. It did provide a very short summary, some suggested questions. It could create more frequently asked questions based on the article, study guide, timeline, briefing document. Let's say if you want to look what the briefing document look like. It creates some questions with answers based on the article and maybe some essay questions. But what the most fun for me is, it did create
Welcome
a
to the deep
podcast.
dive. Ready to explore something pretty cool today?
Already?
Awesome. We're diving into virtual reality and how it can help people learn English.
VR for language learning. I like it.
You too. And get this, we're not just speculating. We've got some solid research to back us up.
Oh, even better. Where's this research from?
So it took 1 minute for this tool to create a podcast, 15 minutes podcast based on my article. Kind of neat. And it doesn't feel like it's auto-generated. It feels like a real conversation.
I do want to hand over the remaining time now to our guest, Ben Taylor. And Ben, you're an academic skills program coordinator. You work with writing and academic skills in the Student Success Center. So happy to have you. Thanks for joining us, and I'll flip it over to you to take us through your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And thanks everyone for having me. Thanks to Karen Hamilton actually for inviting me. It was very kind of her. I've been working with her lately on a few things with writing support. So she happened to mention this, and I said, yes, I would love to talk about writing and AI because it's a topic that I'm kind of working through myself. So you'll have to bear with me. I probably won't have a lot of answers for you tonight, but I'll probably have a lot of questions that I can kind of plant in your minds. So the topic of the presentation tonight is writing with generative AI, enhancement or replacement. As Dan mentioned, my current role is an academic skills program coordinator with the Student Success Center at McMaster within our writing and academic skills team. And so I oversee undergraduate and graduate writing support at McMaster, which includes these one-on-one appointments for writing consults we do with students, yearly programs, and this does include MCE students as well. I have seen MCE students myself. They book one-on-one appointments with my writing advisors. So just want to throw that out there. My career, though, at McMaster began with McPherson in June of last year, so 2023, where I started a postdoctoral fellowship. We're doing research on generative AI and assessment practices. That research is ongoing, but you can see some of the outputs at this website, genaiteach.ca. Part of our output was to produce some open educational resources around assessments that instructors were designing and developing that incorporated the use of generative AI. So you can go there, get some ideas possibly. And some of the research and just information I'm going to share tonight kind of emerges out of that. The two camps of interest I have, my PhD in English, I've done a lot of writing in my life, and now this new technology that is very much having a a really significant impact, and as Anastasia mentioned in her presentation. So I'm hoping like what I'm going to talk about will build on that a bit. So my quick agenda is I want to talk about some of the key areas of impact. And again, thank you, Anastasia. You went over a lot of these areas of impact. I'm just going to kind of expand on a few of them and then link them to this idea of cognitive offloading. And I'll explain what this is in a little bit. Talk about some of the potential benefits and risks of cognitive offloading and then using generative AI for this process. And finally, get to the sort of meat here of writing in generative AI, thinking about the process of writing versus the product of writing. And I have a little worksheet I'll leave you with to do on your own if you'd like, or just something to get you thinking. It's a worksheet I developed for a workshop that I used this presentation for this past summer with the Education and Cognition Conference at McMaster. So a lot of different pieces I've kind of mushed together here, but I think it'll work out well. To get started, I have a Mentimeter, so I was hoping, I know it's late and people are probably feeling a little sleepy maybe. I thought I'd get some participation here. Just wanted to kind of take a temperature. I like to do this with these presentations to see what is your comfort level and your expertise with generative AI, would you say, out of these 5 options, if you had to choose? Okay, interesting. Okay, so we're like leaning towards the integral part of my workflow, use it multiple times a week. Every time I do this, it's a bit different. So I had like a perfect bell curve, one of the previous ones I did where it was like right in the middle. Another one I did, it was way towards the right there where people were not using it. Just try it once or twice.
Ben, if you refresh it, you'll get an update here again.
Okay. All right, there we go. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so a bit of a split here now, even as we refresh this. Let me try one more time. Okay, we'll leave it at that, about 18. That's a good sample size. So most of you have used it at least once or twice, and then several, occasionally multiple times, integral part of your workflow. So thank you for that. So we've already kind of talked about this in the previous presentation. What is generative artificial intelligence? Essentially, it's one type of AI. I like to stress that because there are many types of AI. AI has been around for a long time. It does a lot of different things, but it's very, popular and it's very in the public discourse because of ChatGPT being released in November of 2022. So it's just that we now have consumer grade large language models that are open to everybody, right? And as was mentioned in the previous presentation, we have outputs that are in response to an input. Outputs are made possible through a training process. The training happens on massive, inconceivably massive data sets that we can't even sort of wrap our heads around. But the other thing to note is that many non-AI apps are starting to integrate or already do integrate generative AI features. I'm not sure if all of you are seeing the AI button on your Zoom now, but I noticed that recently they're creeping in everywhere. So I think, despite trying to resist in many ways, the technologies, the application software that we use on a regular basis are going to start having these things just integrated, whether we agree to it or not. So there's these quick and unpredictable changes that we have to react to. In terms of higher education, I break the concerns down like this. Research in AI and education, of course, isn't new, but as I mentioned, the release of ChatGPT in 2022, I think, has accelerated interest in the topic. So over the past year or so, now we're going on 2 years, believe it or not, some key areas of impact have emerged. Academic integrity, of course, being one. I see the back and forth conversation about plagiarism or AI detectors. So plagiarism and cheating remain central concerns for many instructors and administrators for good reasons. Job readiness is a very key concern as well. The question of whether it's the university's responsibility to train students in the effective and ethical use of AI for the workplace. Accessibility and inclusion have been a focus. AI technologies have been leveraged even before the release of ChatGPT to help students with disabilities. So assistive technologies have been using AI, for years now. And then finally, I've highlighted the learning process because that's what we're really here to talk about today. How can AI assist in this learning process? We just saw some of those customized tutoring chatbots, which can be used to assist in the learning process. the creation of alternative examples to explain concepts. But of course, there's a lot of risks involved. The risk of de-skilling, of students actually losing out on learning skills or becoming less skilled because they're not practicing these things, and instead offloading them to AI, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So a quick list of risks and considerations. Some of these are reiterated from the previous presentation. But first, the impact on learning. We have some recent research on, and this is where I kind of get this language of enhancement versus replacement, Bastani et al. Talking about, do we have AI or generative AI that is enhancing students' learning and abilities, or is it replacing those that learning and those abilities and causing them to rely on this tool? Abbas et al. Studies showed that there's a possible increase in procrastination and memory loss the more students use generative AI. Just think, if you know that this thing can do something really quickly for you, as that was demonstrated in the previous presentation, you can wait till the last minute, right? You might procrastinate more knowing that you've got this kind of magic tool that will get you out of things in the end. The same way with memory loss, right? If you're not doing the work over and over again and imprinting that thing on your memory, and you're relying on AI to do it, you're potentially going to have, a lower capacity for memory, let's say. Ethical concerns, I'll leave those because those were already discussed in the previous presentation. And then I'll just note that currently at McMaster, the policies are up to professors to determine acceptable use. And, there's these guidelines that have been revised a couple times now, that are not necessarily, they're not quite policy, but there's guidelines and suggestions around those. And I have a link there to those. So gonna sort of open this up for open responses, and a lot of times I think instructors use this as a time to vent, so feel free to vent if that's what you want to do. But what are some of the ways you've encountered students using generative AI? I know Yvonne said, copy and pasting 100%, which this is how I got interested in this topic. Just as an aside, I was on the Academic Integrity Committee at Seneca Polytechnic, formerly college, in fall of 2022, and started seeing the first cases roll in, and I thought, this is going to be big. And then the postdoc was posted, so that's kind of how I got involved in this. So I'm definitely with you on the frustrations and concerns around academic integrity and plagiarism. Building presentations, writing papers, pretty common, I think. Just assignments in general. So kind of like big picture here, like the big sort of holistic view of what they're using it for to do these particular things. The worksheet I have later, I hope will get you to maybe think about like specific tasks they're using it for, like breaking it down in a more granular way. Submitting their case analysis to AI instead of analyzing it. Okay, so offloading the analysis, yeah. Created problems in course teamwork. That's really interesting. I'm assuming that's around some students wanting to use AI or choosing to use it, and others saying we don't want to use it. A conflict there potentially. Okay, I'm gonna continue, because yeah, these are kind of very common things I see on this slide. So thinking about the things students are using generative AI for, I want to shift the focus now to this idea of cognitive offloading, which is how I frame the idea of integrating AI into assessment tasks, and in particular for this presentation, writing tasks. So cognitive offloading is essentially the use of a physical action to alter information processing requirements of a task so as to reduce cognitive demand. This comes from Risco and Gilbert, 2016. It's a pretty common definition that's used now. So to give you a concrete example, literally taking notes is cognitive offloading. You're using a physical action to sort of alter the information processing requirements. You no longer have to keep that information in your head. You take a note, you can kind of free up some capacities for to reduce cognitive demand. Using a calculator, using a GPS app, you no longer have to think about, which way to turn. You can listen to the voice telling you. Even tilting your head. So if you turn text, 90 degrees, if you tilt your head, it's a physical action that reduces the load on your cognitive processing. So you don't have to sort of do the turning mentally, you do it physically. Interestingly, I think the research shows that individuals exhibit overconfidence in their abilities after engaging in cognitive offloading. So this is something to keep in mind. When you cognitive offload enough times, you maybe get this false sense that you're good at something, but really what you've done is you've offloaded it so many times that it's become so natural to you. And I think this is really important when we're thinking about generative AI and allowing students to maybe offload tasks to it. So this has a very clear implication for student learning processes and development. So I'll ask you a question just to think about cognitive offloading, this idea of like sort of offloading tasks, offloading mental processes in some way. Can you think of any ways that you use cognitive offloading in your own life? Sometimes there's some very creative ones here. I think there's a lot while you're driving a car where you're cognitive offloading things for sure. Again, like that GPS piece, for sure. And you probably do cognitive offloading while you're driving a car. But even things like, to give more concrete examples, if it helps, things like putting reminders in your phone, shopping list, excellent. Yeah, creating a shopping list. So you don't have to keep those things in your head. Searching for something online potentially could be considered, yeah, cognitive offloading. But yeah, reminders in your phone. Classic one was tying a string around your finger, right, to remind you of something. Oftentimes it's writing things down. Those are kind of the biggest pieces, using a calculator, as I mentioned in the previous slide. I think there's all kinds of different concrete examples, but the idea here is taking something, offloading it onto some other technology, some physical action to help kind of alleviate that load on your mind so you can free up capacity for other things. So some of the potential benefits and risks of cognitive offloading, I think these are important to think about. Benefits, of course, you have increased cognitive capacity maybe for higher order thinking. So if we can offload lower order concerns, for instance, with writing, we could talk about grammar, having students use AI to fix their grammar and syntax so then they can think about the higher order things like big ideas, argumentation, structure. The repeated process of storage and retrieval, according to a couple of researchers here, can actually enhance learning. So the more you write something down, and I think we've seen this with students, they take notes, they write things down, they retrieve things out of their notes, using note cards to study, you're storing and retrieving over and over again. This can actually benefit your learning and enhance your learning. It can also reduce stress and anxiety. If you know you've got something written down, you don't have to stress about remembering it, and can encourage opportunities for reflective judgment of the work you produce via cognitive offloading. The risks, of course, I mentioned a couple of these: overconfidence in your own abilities, outsourcing of work integral to the learning process. So we have to think about what are students offloading, and this is where we're going to connect this to generative AI. A lost opportunity to imprint long-term memory. So the same researchers who say maybe this helps with learning also say it could create a lost opportunity to imprint something on your long-term memory. So there's always drawbacks and challenges. And then inaccurate assessment of student abilities. And this ties in directly with this conversation around plagiarism, academic integrity, right? If you're assessing something and it's been entirely offloaded to another tool, you're not accurately assessing your students' abilities. And this is really the kind of crux of what the concern is here, right? We want to be assessing our students for the actual work they're producing, for their actual skills, the skills and abilities that they've developed in a course, not the ones they've offloaded to some tool. So offloading to generative AI. Generative AI's introduction has led to a greater focus on process and assessment. So I'm interested in exploring how that actual process of cognitive offloading, why and how it happens, and understanding how it can be harnessed as an integral part of the learning process, rather than just a means to an end, right? How is like doing the act of offloading, could that actually be a learning process? So I'm going to introduce a few models here for thinking, understanding about how generative AI could be changing the way that we engage in cognitive offloading. And I'll give you a couple figures from two of these to just give you something to think about, and then I'll try to connect this to some of this to the writing process itself and how I see it, and then we'll end by sharing that worksheet I mentioned. So I think I'm about 12 minutes here or so I think I can get through it. One way of thinking about this is through the notion of distributed cognition, which these two researchers discuss in relation to Gen AI's introduction to the general public. In distributed cognition, cognitive offloading is a very seamless and fluid process due to kind of effortless interactions with digital and smart technologies. So there's these kind of blurred boundaries. We don't know where the machine ends and the human begins. It's not as easy to kind of identify as when you're using a calculator. We know what the calculator did, we know what the human did. There's a bit more of a distributed model in this Grinchell and Neubauer framework, distributed cognition. Recently, a research team, Lodge et al., presented what they called a quadrant typology of human-machine interactions, which attempts to add some additional dimensions to conventional understandings of how humans interface with computers. I'll show that model in a second. Some of these are a bit high level, but it just gives you different ways of thinking about how we interact with technology. And then finally, a very interesting paper by Del Acqua et al., which his team actually has Ethan Mollick on it. And some of you might be familiar with Ethan Mollick. He's very prolific. He's a professor at Wharton, but he's also a prolific writer on all things generative AI. He's kind of like one of the leaders right now in the sphere. But these researchers identified what they call the jagged technological frontier in relation to AI's capabilities and its potential for accomplishing different tasks. This is what the typology of human-machine interactions looks like in Lodge et al.'s article. The vertical axis represents possibilities for AI to take on mundane tasks, freeing up capacity for other mental tasks, while the horizontal axis represents the nature of human-machine relationships as either emphasizing the individual learner or a more collaborative arrangement of human and machine working in concert. And those are their exact words. So I think it's easy to show that, this interaction between AI and the human could move more in towards this collaborative domain where learners begin to work in concert with generative AI and towards the goal of extending their knowledge rather than merely offloading something to AI, doing what some of you were discussing, where they basically offload the entire paper to AI and then turn that in. Could there be a way they can use generative AI to actually extend their abilities through learning how to interact with it in a collaborative manner and become a kind of like hybrid of human machine? And then the jagged technological frontier. I think this is a very interesting practical example because this research was done in a professional space where workers were given a series of tasks that were deemed to be relatively similar in difficulty. So along this dotted line, all of these tasks are kind of similar in difficulty. What the researchers found is that AI had this jagged frontier or this jagged ability to do some tasks very well and others not so well, despite those tasks being equal in difficulty. So what this tells us is that we need to really think about what generative AI is good at and what it's not good at. It doesn't do all things equally. I think Anastasia mentioned math not being something that large language models are very good at doing. A lot of people don't know this, but they're really terrible at math. They're not designed to be good at math. So even if you think 2 + 2 is just as easy as, writing a simple sentence, it's going to be better at writing that sentence versus doing 2 + 2. Although it should be fine at doing 2 + 2. It's not that complicated, but there are some math problems that seem very simple, like it should be able to do them and it's not able to. From this research, the authors studied how a group of professionals navigated this frontier. So they kind of identified this frontier of tasks and the jagged frontier of AI's capabilities through two typologies. And they called these centaur and cyborg typologies, which I find very interesting. And you've got to think of this in terms of the mythical creature, the centaur, and then sort of like technological sci-fi creature or sci-fi invention, the cyborg. Centaurs distinguished between different kinds of labor. So they strategically divided labor into what AI does, what I do as a human, and those two do not really mix. They're very separate. So you've got the, the horse and the human. Whereas cyborgs did this sort of intricate interweaving. They went back and forth with AI a lot, so that by the end of the project, you might not know what AI did and what the human did, but the project was finished. The result was there. It was produced. So how does this all relate to the writing process? And I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to try and get through this, but I felt like I needed a lot of build up here. This is one of the figures I usually show to students when I'm teaching them about the complexities of the writing process, especially at an academic level, that this is a kind of cyclical iterative process, right? That you enter in by pre-writing, planning, drafting, reflecting on your draft, getting peer review, revising, and just at the moment when you think you're going to edit and proofread your piece, you realize, wait, I need more research. I need to fix my draft. Someone gave me feedback, so I need to move right back into that drafting stage. And you end up in that cycle for a long time. And those of you who write a lot, I'm sure you can relate to this. You end up in that cycle a long time until you finally get spit out through the editing and proofreading phase. But that doesn't always come very quickly. So here's some ways that generative AI might intervene here, right? So we're thinking about ways to allow students to offload tasks, individual granular tasks to generative AI versus saying you can just use it to write your paper. There's things it can do pretty well. Pre-writing, it can help students with brainstorming, narrowing down a topic, planning, give it your notes and it'll organize them for you. It can help create an initial outline. Of course, drafting, I think this is the one where the hairs on everyone's backs raise, right? Producing the whole text. Maybe we want to get away from that, right? But a lot of people will also use generative AI to provide feedback on a draft. Give it your draft and it will give you feedback. It will help give you some suggestions for revisions. And if we teach students how to use these prompts responsibly and ethically, I think the results will be much better than saying, you can't use it, period, right? So telling students, do not take it at face value. Don't let it be your voice. Don't let it change your writing, full sail. Give it your writing, ask it for some suggestions, and then you go back to the drawing board with those suggestions. Don't let it write for you. So I think there's ways that it can be offloaded, right? Writing tasks can actually be offloaded. Additional research or idea generation, you could ask it to identify some gaps in your work, suggest some further reading if you're missing a source. And finally, the very low level concerns in writing or low order concerns of grammar, syntax, formatting. And I think this is particularly valuable and powerful for students whose first language is in English, for students who maybe just don't have the background of schooling in grammar, syntax, and English, whatever the case may be. If we can maybe give up some of the attachments we have to thinking students need to do all of this, I kind of think the results might be good. And that's coming from someone who's done a lot of writing and fixates a lot on grammar, a lot on syntax. I do it all myself. Even I'm kind of open to the possibilities here. I'll share my slides. I didn't send them to you, Dan, but I'm happy to, so that you can actually access these links. But these are kind of some recommended tools for writing and for research. So when we're thinking about, the level of that we're talking about of students at university, a lot of research goes into their writing. So there are some tools that McMaster actually endorse it. I wouldn't say endorse, but we have an enterprise license for this last tool, Cite AI, which is a tool you can ask a research question to, and it will spit back at you 25 of the top research papers on that research question, give you a quick summary of those papers in kind of like a lit review style summary. I think it's a really powerful research tool. I'm hesitant to give it to undergraduate students because I think they need to learn the research process before they can distinguish whether an AI tool is actually producing good research. But a couple of these other tools under research are useful. Connected papers and lit maps, you can give a DOI or a single paper identifier, and it will map out a network of who cites that paper, which other papers that paper has cited. It creates a kind of visual bibliometric network of where that paper sits in relation to the other research. I just have two more slides. This is a quote I think that resonates with me a lot, and I think it resonates with others as well. It's from Bierman and Luke in 2020, and this is even before the advent of ChatGPT. But these two were thinking about what the impact of AI technologies were going to be on education. And they said, we suggest, therefore, that we should be directing our students towards things that they can do better than machines. And so I think in order to do that, we first have to identify what machines, I don't want to say what machines can do better than students, but what machines can do well that we don't necessarily need students to do, that aren't aligned with the learning outcomes we're looking for. So again, if you can let go of something like grammar or syntax, if that's not your primary concern with your students' ideas, their ability to express themselves, their critical thinking, is that something that you could potentially be okay with them offloading to a tool like generative AI, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot? I don't have time to kind of show you this. I was going to maybe show you the worksheet, but again, I'll share these slides. Basically, this worksheet I created has a table of potential tasks, writing specific, that generative AI could be used for and how it could be used. And then it has just some questions. They're reflective questions that ask you to think about an assessment that involves writing and pick one of these tasks. Just humor me, pick one task and answer these questions about how AI might be able to be integrated into that assessment, how you might allow students to use AI to do that one task, and what impact that would have on that assessment, what impact that would have on your course, what impact that would have on the learning outcomes and your students' mastery of the material. So I'd invite you just to check it out. It's freely licensed under Creative Commons, so share widely if you'd like. After I share these slides, you'll see I've got my references and resources if you want to check any of these out, and my information if you'd like to contact me with questions or just to chat. I'd be happy to, I'm always happy to just chat about whatever. I like to talk. So yeah, thank you again for inviting me. Similar to Contact North's assessment kind of generator teacher tool, I helped sort of project manage, I would say, and kind of advised on a tool that we have it's sort of still in beta phase, called the Assessment Partner. And so it's through McPherson and an engineering employee, and it generates assessments. And so it's got a bunch of things you can test out there. So you can generate multiple choice exams, you can generate essay questions and things like that. So I'll share that link in the chat. But again, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time, and I hope I hope you're having a good fall and that this technology isn't causing you too much trouble. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Ben. This is certainly an exciting time. Lots of things are happening that are taking us really fast forward into the future. So buckle your seatbelts, and who knows where it'll go, and don't get used to anything for too soon, because things will change so quickly in technology. But anyway, thanks very much, everybody. Have a good evening, and we'll see you all online. Take care.